It's not advancing. There we go. So first that we'll go into is essential strategies for thriving in your role, with the theme of navigating unexpected challenges. So first, I think it's really important to talk about boundaries. Uh, Boundaries, this is something I joke about, that I spent all of my 30s building my filter, and then now I'm spending all of my 40s setting my boundaries. I'm 46 now, so I'm working my way through, and we're getting there. I think by my 50s, hopefully I'll have done a good job of my own boundaries. Um, One of the things, though, first I offer to think about in your caregiving role is um, think about what you're willing to give first in terms of caregiving. And I understand, from chatting with Jean, the people who are on the call today, people are at all sorts of different stages of their caregiving role, whether they be new caregivers or very seasoned caregivers. But setting boundaries and thinking through what you're offering is something that is valuable at any stage of caregiving. It's never too late or too far gone to reevaluate and reconsider, where things are at, how you are doing as a caregiver, and what you are able to offer and best suited to do. So think through, what are you willing to give as a caregiver? What are your strengths? What can you offer best? And build your role and your boundaries around that. Think through, what are you comfortable offering as a caregiver? And are there certain things as a caregiver you're not comfortable doing? It's okay to be not comfortable with certain tasks and to voice that concern, and to find a workaround for that, and to find a solution for somebody else to perhaps manage that if you have people in your circle. Um, Also think through, what are your special skills and talents and resources that you bring to the table. We often all do best in our roles when we're able to really shine in the things that we're strongest at. And also thinking through the people in the circle of care who are people who are supportive of and caring for the person you're caring for. Think through, what are their strengths? What are they really good at? Are they really good at, balancing books and managing money? Could they perhaps support on paying bills and managing taxes if that's some of the needs of caregiving? Um, do they have a less flexible schedule and have a hard time offering to help to support? If so, are there some tasks that are less regular and less routine that you could give somebody who needs a little bit more flexibility? Kind of thinking through, what are the needs of the person you're caring for, and what are your strengths and skills, and comparing the two lists and figuring out what are the things that still need to be covered off on this list, and who can best help with that. We've got a couple of resource sheets in our caregiver's guide that can help with that. First is the Define Your Caregiving Role worksheet. It's on page 17 in the guide. That one will help you kind of work through, what are you comfortable with? What are you not comfortable with? What are your strengths? How do you feel about the caregiving role? It really helps. It's an exercise to help you work through and connect in deeper with your caregiving role. Also, there is a loved one's needs assessment. That's on page 15, and that helps. That's a good check-in for any stage of the person who needs care, because things often evolve and change. And it's going through a needs assessment of what is the type of care they need, and help kind of, itemizing out what types of care and support are needed, and thinking through then who then can help and support on that. So part of setting boundaries too is being realistic in the types of boundaries that you're setting, and being firm and strong in those. It's really easy sometimes to um, you know have a boundary and set it, but then not always defend it and stick to it. So we'd like to offer a couple quick tips to help stick to those boundaries. So first would be learning when to say no and to prepare explanations in advance. Sometimes people in need of care are going to request things that might not be possible or unreasonable, or sometimes even unsafe. So in the instance of somebody receiving care, they might not want to eat or to bathe or to clean. those are things that are not possible in terms of care. They need to be able to maintain those things. So if you are prepared in advance and anticipate some of those boundaries being pushed, you can have your responses ready and your boundaries set, and it makes it a lot easier to say no or to hold your boundary in advance if you are prepared and solid and secure in those boundaries. Also, asking for help when you need it. I'm sure as caregivers, you hear this all the time, and it's tough. I hate to, emphasize something that you already know, and that sometimes is a hard thing and can struggle with asking for help. Most caregivers have a hard time asking for help. I fully understand. But you shouldn't be sacrificing your job or your home life or your relationships to be a caregiver. When you need help, you do need to pull in other family members or friends or neighbors, or perhaps even paid help if you have the means and resources to do so, to help lighten that caregiving load. Being specific about the jobs and tasks that are needed are really helpful too. What I find is, in my own experience, people are really willing to help and they want to help, but they don't always know what needs to be done. So actually having a list or specific tasks that you want to ask a person to do makes it much easier for them to be able to help and to take on those tasks. Creating like a sign-up sheet or a schedule where you can share that with your circle of care of all your people helping to support, and they can sign up on certain tasks to help. That could be a useful way of rallying the troops to really help provide the care and building that village. Also, scheduling time for yourself and for your friends and family. I put this little quote here to the side. You don't have to set yourself on fire to keep others warm. It's a bit of a silly way to say it, but it really does make sense. You don't need to sacrifice yourself. You need to stay strong and healthy yourself to be able to offer that care. So that's part of sticking to your boundaries, is the boundaries of caring for yourself. If you treat yourself like your own patient, like your own person who needs to receive the care and to be looked after and to get those square meals and to get that, that quick walk outside to get a mental break and to get some fresh air. Those are very important things to need to strengthen for yourself and to protect those things for yourself. Those are boundaries as well. Self-care is boundaries. Moving on to developing a crisis plan. So now this one's an interesting one because when we're deep into the trenches of caregiving, um, you're really an essential person. You're so needed for that caregiving role. So what happens when stuff hits the fan and all of a sudden situations arise where you're not able to provide care? As Jose was saying, caregiving can often be a very physical job too. So what happens when you're not able to do some of those physical things? What if you slipped on the wonderful ice that we have outside on the sidewalk and fractured an elbow? What are the contingency plans for that? Also, what happens when health changes? What if your person that you're caring for has a sudden deterioration of wellness? What happens then? And also planning ahead for what if, one of these massive windstorms that we've been getting lately, what if that knocks out power? What does that mean in terms of caregiving? We'll go into each of these in a bit more detail in a second. One little note, I couldn't help myself but to put this toilet paper picture here for disaster planning. My poor husband, he was the guy in charge of ensuring that Costco in Western Canada had toilet paper throughout the pandemic. So it was quite the daily update I would get from him coming home every day. So yeah, I always have to put that toilet paper picture up because it gives me a personal chuckle. So, first, if you're suddenly able to provide care, so say you have a medical issue yourself or an injury, in advance of that, you don't want to be scrambling when that happens because you don't know how much you're going to be able to help at the time. So it's always good in advance to think through and have 2 or 3 people that you could call in to help out if an emergency happens. And I challenge you to go beyond that a step further too, and be prepared in advance that they have everything they need to step into that role quickly. So think through things like, do these people who would be stepping in to help, do they have keys, to the house or to the vehicles? Do they have instructions for care, for the routines, or for medications, that kind of thing? So think through what you do in a day in your role as a caregiver and equip people that can jump in for you with instructions to do that role well. Because you just don't know, when things change, and you need to be able to, transition your role as smoothly as you possibly can in a difficult situation. Also, if it's possible, you might want to set aside some financial resources to be able to call in professional help and professional support in the event of a crisis plan, or in the event of a crisis where you're not able to provide support. So also having those types of organizations ready, having those numbers written down, perhaps even some exploratory phone calls to different organizations that can offer care, just to find out, are they available on the ready? What are the costs? What needs to be done? That's a really good way to be prepared in the event that you all of a sudden can't provide care yourself. Now, when we think through, in the event of your loved one, the person you're providing care for, if they all of a sudden have a sudden deterioration in wellness, for many people who are receiving care, they're able to tell you, if they're unwell or if they're hurting or if something's changed for their health. But in the event of different types of medical conditions, so Alzheimer's, for example, is a good example of this. The person you're caring for might not be able to articulate to you what is going on with their health. My good friend, her mom had Alzheimer's, and I remember that was quite a thing that came up regularly for them. Say her mom got a UTI or something like that. Her mom wasn't able to communicate at that point, that she was feeling certain physical symptoms. So instead, the family needed to be very observant and watch for changes in their loved ones to be able to identify and know the signs of whether there might be a change in health. So those could be things like physical changes, so fever and pain, and grimacing on the face, for example, is an indicator of pain. Favoring, like, say you have a leg pain, or there's something going on with your foot or something. They might be limping. That might be a way to observe a physical pain. Also, changes in appetite and eating schedules. That's a really interesting and an obvious sign too that there's something going on perhaps with health. Behavioral changes like mood, attention, depression, aggression. When people are in pain, that we can all relate. We've all been in pain in various ways in our lives. It can easily show up in our mood. And then functional changes, like you might have a ear infection, for example, the sudden loss of hearing, or inability to get up from a chair, changes in mobility, that kind of thing. Those are important things to look out for, particularly when you're caregiving for somebody who might not be able to communicate a change in health to you. So if there's a sudden change in health, having an advanced serious illness plan is really helpful and important when you're going into a medical care situation at the hospital. And we'll talk in more detail about that in a moment. And also having a hospital survival kit ready to go. That one is such a helpful thing to have. And I was kicking myself for this. Monday, a week ago, I ended up in the ER with my 13-year-old, and she just had, really, really bad headache, neck ache, pain, that kind of thing. And so we had to scramble and go to the hospital. And here's me in the car trying to find, a charger and a power bank for my phone, anticipating that we'd be there for a long time, which we were. It was about 10 hours. So having all of those things at the ready really helps you be prepared and not scrambling at the last moment when all of a sudden you may have to go into a hospital. And last, for disaster planning, um, the disaster planning is something, we all especially in the Lower Mainland are well aware of when we think about things like, earthquakes and that kind of thing. But when you're a caregiver, there's different dimensions of being prepared and having an emergency kit. So, for example, having medications, copies of prescriptions, things like hearing aid batteries, putting those in your emergency kit, personal care or hygiene items related to the care that you're offering to your loved one, those all need to be in that emergency kit as well. If your loved one requires any sort of medical devices that need power and you have a power outage, I'm here in Coquitlam, we've got these huge trees and we lose power far too often for my liking. So we recently invested in a large power bank, not a full generator, but a big power bank that would at least keep us going for a day or two, using plug-in types of devices. So those are things you might want to consider because you don't want to find yourself without power and having medical equipment not working like it should, for example. And we've got a list of emergency kit items on page 34 of that Caregiver's Hand Guide. And as always, too, you need to always make sure that you have your important documents compiled and ready to go in case of emergency, in case you need to leave home for an indefinite amount of time. So we've got a really helpful list of important documents you should keep compiled, and that's on page 26 of the Caregiver's Guide. So staying organized, this is one I really like because I like to try to stay as organized as I can, and I use as many tools as I can to keep myself in well organized and in line. Depending on everybody's comfort level or interest in technology, I want to make sure that I offer you resources that are both online, lots of options there, but also offline printable resources. Our Caregiver's Handbook is a PDF that you'll get via email, but you can download it and print as many copies as you like, and use that offline. So there's lots of tools out there too for coordinating caregiver schedules. If there's more than one caregiver helping, coordinating everybody's schedules, tracking medications, planning out meals and dietary needs, compiling documents that are important, and then communication updates with your village. We've probably all been in that situation where you do a group text and half the people get it, some can respond, some can't. So there's lots of different ways using technology too to kind of update everybody online and keep everybody up to speed. Within our Caregiver's Handbook, we've got lots of different resources. So Partners in Care is identifying out all the different people that can help and all their contact information and their roles. We have schedule of daily care activities. That's a good one to use for that crisis planning when you're empowering somebody to step in and help out if you're unable, having that schedule, lined up and ready to go. A medication chart for times a day and what doses, meal planning charts, especially important if there's dietary needs you need to observe, list of important contacts to keep those handy and easy to reach people with. So all of those are available in our Caregiver's Guide. And then online, there's so many different apps available, which are really great. I've listed off a few different categories here. So organization apps for organizing all your caregiving needs, medication reminder apps, super easy to use. Also dementia and caregiving apps, there's a few available here. All of these resources, some are free and some also have reasonably low monthly subscription costs as well. Has anybody used any of these apps by chance? Has anybody given them a try? You can add in the chat if you like or unmute. We can talk about that later too. And then Next up, oh, did we have a chat on that? Caring Bridge. Oh, good. Caring Bridge is great. You've had a good experience with that. Good. I'm so glad. It's so worth trying out if you can upload all of these to your smartphone, nice and easy to use. So next up is enhancing your communication skills. So as you've probably experienced as caregivers, there's a lot of different people involved in the caregiving role. So there's obviously you, the primary caregiver, the person receiving care, friends and family, co-caregivers, whether those are paid caregivers or other people in your circle that are stepping up and helping, as well as the medical team. All of these different relationships require different communication skills. So we've got a few different tips for that today. One of the things I couldn't resist putting up this funny little meme here. I relate to this because in the caregiving for my Granny Betty, we had an aunt who was just just got in the way of the caregiving a lot of the time. So this is me and my aunt in this photo. But there's sometimes hard talks that need to be had in the course of your communication with the person you're providing care for example. So we've got some different tips for navigating through that. There we go. So our 7 tips for hard talks. This is on page 8 of the Caregiver's Guide. And so we've got a few of these to share today. So first is not assuming you know what your loved one wants or needs. We need to make space for them to share about how they're feeling. They need to express their needs and wants to you as their caregiver. Um, it's better for them to have a sense of control over their future and their life by sharing their concerns and their needs, and having them a part of a two-way discussion about these needs helps them be empowered as well in the care that they're receiving. Listening and don't telling. Communication sounds like a lot of talking, but it's also a lot of listening. It's holding space for your loved ones. And the harder a conversation is, the more a person needs to feel heard. So creating space for them to raise their concerns and their questions, you're then providing an environment for a more productive conversation. Next is being straightforward about the facts. It's really important to use plain language and not euphemisms. Be honest about their condition and about their future needs, educated by conversations with the medical team, of course. Express your needs as well and what's realistic for both you and your loved one. Phrasing your concerns as questions. This is all about getting that to be a two-way street on these conversations. So it's a two-way conversation is always way better than a one-way conversation. Phrasing your concerns as questions allows you to involve the other person and allow them to contribute to that discussion. And you'll learn so much more, and your caregiving experience will be better for it, and the care your loved one receives will be all the better for that as well. So hard talks often bring up high emotion and sometimes even anger. And it's okay to make space to allow somebody to express that. Giving them the opportunity to feel heard and acknowledging their feelings is really important, and it helps build that connection and that trust even further in that relationship. Ending the conversation on a positive note. It's really important to validate at the end of the conversation that, hey, that was really hard. It's hard to talk about these things. I appreciate you being willing to talk and come up with solutions here. It's not easy to talk about hard things sometimes. So just really acknowledging that is important too. And then at the end of it, you want to reconnect. In theory, this is your loved one, your family, your friend that you're providing care for. So coming back to the root of that relationship and reconnecting and doing something fun, something pleasurable and enjoyable together is important, to do at the end of a hard talk as well. So we do have a resource from Plan Well Guide too that helps in general with caregiving, but in particular in the topic of communication. So it's called the Guide to Empowering the Caregiver, and we also have a guide to empowering the patient as well. So what this does is it helps identify um, your needs as a caregiver, the challenges afoot when going into the hospital and working with the medical team. And it gives you tools and suggestions and language for having those conversations and getting the information you need in a hospital setting from the medical team. So that tool itself, of course, is developed by Dr. Darren Hyland. He's on the receiving end of those conversations as a physician. So it's a really great tool to get on the same page as your medical team in working with them. So next up is creating an advanced serious illness plan. So this is all about preparing to make those decisions in a time of uncertainty. So you may or may not have heard about advanced serious illness planning, or maybe you've heard of advanced care planning, like the My Voice books here in BC. This is an essential part of incapacity planning. So incapacity is when you're unable to make decisions for yourself. I'm in the Fraser Health region myself, and the stat here in Fraser Health is that 70% of people who are admitted to hospital in Fraser Health at some point in time are not able to make decisions for themselves. So that's huge. 70% of people at some point in their visit. So incapacity can come and go. You may be unable to make decisions for yourself for a couple of hours or a couple of days, and then you get your capacity back and you're back to making decisions for yourself. In a caregiving role, that can look the same for your loved one. Your loved one may go into the hospital, may not be able to make decisions for themselves for a part or all of that hospital visit, and then those decisions go to the person appointed to make decisions. So with advanced serious illness planning, we're preparing for making those crucial decisions. We're not making decisions today. We're not saying in advance, I want this, I don't want that, but we're thinking through our values and our preferences and guided exercises to understand what's important to us for medical care or for personal care or for financial management, all of those things that impact us when we can't make decisions for ourselves, and we turn those into actionable plans to guide our decision makers. So for you as caregivers, this is important for you if you ever have an illness yourself, but it's also important for the person you're providing care for to understand what their needs are and what's important to them if you need to make decisions on their behalf. The reason we do this too is to help you navigate this with greater confidence. It gives you clarity. You know that decisions are being made for you as a patient with your needs and your voice guiding those decisions. And if you are the decision maker and you're helping the person you're providing care for, you know that you're guided by their instructions, and that gives a lot of peace of mind. So we've developed this graphic. It's called the three-legged stool of incapacity planning, and current models of incapacity planning. It's amazing if you have a representation agreement for health decisions, if you have a power of attorney for finances, extra bonus points if you have things like critical illness insurance, long-term care insurance, disability insurance. That covers off the financial end of things. But oftentimes, there's not a lot of thought and consideration that goes into the actual medical event of the incapacity, which is a really important part. So if you don't have that planned for, then that stool is not going to be very steady and stable, is it? And oftentimes, I think a lot of us don't want to talk about serious illness. And so we'll use euphemisms like, I don't want to be a vegetable, when we're empowering our people to make decisions for us. I personally have had to make decisions for loved ones in the hospital, and I can assure you no questions were asked of me that involved vegetables. So it's really important to actually have a real conversation and to really give some great thought to what is important to you, because you don't want gray area types of instructions like this to be guiding your care. And Also, too, if you've done something like advanced care planning, that is amazing, and I'm glad for it. But we can do better. What Dr. Hyland found is in the course of his research that he's done in ICU, he went and he did a study where he interviewed people who'd been through the ICU and had come out and gone back into the regular ward. And he interviewed them and asked about he reviewed their charts to see what the health issue was at hand. He asked them what they would choose for themselves, and then he reviewed the care they received. And he found that only 1 in 3 people actually received the type of care they wanted for themselves if they were able to choose for themselves. So that's huge. That means 2 in 3 people that go through the door of a hospital are not going to receive the care they want if somebody is making decisions for them. I don't want that to be me, that's for sure. I want the care that reflects my values. And I want my decision makers to be equipped with those instructions so that they're not making decisions in a difficult time. When I had to make medical decisions for my dad, this is a number of years ago, long before I did this type of work, we hadn't had a lot of great conversations about what he would want. So I was making those decisions in that gray area and just really hoping that I was getting it right. And that's a position of a lot of stress and uncertainty. And the result of all of this is that the patients aren't receiving the care that they want, and their caregivers and decision makers are experiencing a lot of stress going through that experience. So all in, we want to resolve that and make that so much better for you. So what we've developed is advanced care planning. The next evolution of advanced care planning. So advanced serious illness planning. It's a 3-step process. So first is the guide to exploring. This is all about getting educated on what types of care and treatments are offered in the ICU. That's where people are going when they have a serious illness. So it provides opportunities to reflect and really think about what's important to you, what you're willing to endure and what you're not willing to endure in a medical treatment setting. All of the educational tools are developed by Dr. Darren Hyland. So it's straight from a doctor educating you on all of the different types of medical treatments involved. And then it documents all of your values and preferences into a Dear Doctor letter. And then that communicates to your loved ones and your medical team what your values are. And that helps guide the decision-making process. The second step is the guide to equipping, and this is all about taking the learnings and plans from the guide to exploring and briefing your decision maker, your representative, to make decisions for you. So I would suspect probably many people on the call today have an appointed representative that would make decisions for them. And if they don't, and same thing for the people they're providing care for, they likely may have a representative agreement in place. But if they don't, in BC and across Canada, the decision making goes through a list decided by the government of who is going to make those decisions for you. And you may or may not agree with who would be the person making those choices. So developing a agreement with the guide to equipping is an important step. And then lastly is the guide to entrusting. So unfortunately, misuse of funds ends up being a more common aspect of financial management than we would like. It's often not done out of malice, but it happens often, unfortunately. So part of the guide to entrusting focuses on putting the language around protection against misuse of funds into your power of attorney for finances. So you develop your Dear Lawyer letter or Dear Notary letter with this guide, and you take that to your lawyer or notary to create a power of attorney for finances or update one that's existing. And then all of these plans are done online. So you complete the plans using your desktop or laptop computer or your tablet. You go through the process to create your plan for yourself, or you sit with the person you're caregiving with and help them work through the guides. And then those guides are available online at any time that you need them. So the letters are created and generated online. You download them So you have a PDF of everything. You can print out as many copies as you want. You can email them to your loved ones or your care team. And then we also have these wallet cards too that you can keep in your wallet, and it has a scannable QR code. So if you or your loved one goes to hospital, you can easily scan that QR code and have those plans available for you at your fingertips. And you can go in anytime and update them. We often recommend doing it, every couple of birthdays or on the big birthdays, when there's a change in your household structure of who you're living with, or when there's changes in your health. It's a great time to go back in and just review your plans and make any tweaks that you need. And then last part of our talk today is about seeking support and preventing burnout. I love this graphic because self-care, I think some of you could relate. Self-care when you're a caregiver can often be a bit of a dirty word because you're so busy, you've got lots on the go, you're tired, you're keeping up on your person's needs and sometimes your own needs, and then somebody tells you, oh, you got to care for yourself. It's a tough pill to swallow sometimes. So I came across this video the other day. I won't play it because there's a little bit of salty language in it, but I can share the link with the group later and you can watch if you like. And it's talking about the overflow mindset. And so it's saying, forget this concept about you can't pour from an empty cup, right? Instead, it's talking about you need to support yourself and pour into your own cup so that you are topped up and you're feeling good. And then your cup will overflow. And the care that the people around us get, that is the overflow. So they shouldn't be taking and drinking from your cup. They don't get the tilt of the cup. They get the overflow from what you have put into yourself to make yourself resilient. So that was a really interesting look at it. I'd never heard it said that way before, so I thought it was worth offering today. And a couple strategies too. Self-care is not all about bubble baths and trip to the spa. I know you guys don't have time for that. So instead, just offering a couple easy things to do for your own wellness as a caregiver. Part of wellness is really checking in with yourself and thinking to yourself, how are you doing? How are you feeling about all of this? Emotionally, physically, all of that. We've got a resource in the Caregiver's Guide called the Caregiving Self-Assessment. It's on page 39, and it helps walk you through those types of questions to really check in with yourself and see how you're doing. Giving yourself compassion. You're not going to be able to do everything to 110% every single day. Be realistic with yourself and about what you can achieve and what's expected of you. Give yourself some care and love and grace there. A little bit of nature does everybody really well. We're so blessed here in BC to have such beautiful nature. Even if you can get out and just sit outside for a moment and catch some sun and breathe some fresh air, or get a little walk around your neighborhood lake or trail, or just down your block, can really make a difference to your mental mindset every day. Just getting that little bit of fresh air. And social connections, I think, are super important too. I know one of the comments, when we did the check-in earlier, is feeling invisible and feeling unseen. And if you can have that social connection and people that you can touch base with, even through a quick phone call or a little text or something like that, a little email, every day just makes such a difference to boost our spirits and to boost our hearts. So it's good to, be connected so well with the person you're providing care with, but also all those people that are being support people to you and making sure that you're doing okay. It's good to have those check-ins. And one other piece I offer here too is identifying your own barriers to wellness. So it's common for caregivers to not feel like they have the time, for care for themselves, or they feel guilty about it. They feel guilty, when they're putting their needs in front of their loved ones. Sometimes maybe they feel like they have to earn their affection by all the caregiving work they're doing. The one thing that is a barrier to my wellness that's come up for me in the past is the urge to always be involved in caregiving tasks. When you have such a long list and there's always something to do, it's really hard to sometimes police yourself and stop and take that break, and disconnect a little bit from your caregiving role, because you are so much more than just the care you're offering to others. And sometimes just really thinking about, what is stopping you from providing care from yourself, that can really help with helping you kind of identify that and work through that and break down that barrier for yourself. And I have just a couple quick tips here on seeking support and preventing burnout. So when you're asking for help and bringing people in to help with this, explain the situation and how you're feeling. Start with your feelings, because nobody can debate with you how you feel. How you feel is how you're feeling. Be specific about what you need. Don't just ask for help, but give concrete examples of what you need help with. And also ask them, how would you like to contribute? If they're saying no to list item 1, 2, and 3, then you can say, well, how would you like to contribute? How can you help out in this situation, and put it in their hands to come back to you with ways they can help. We talked a bit today about technology. Use those worksheets that you print out, or those apps to help you, manage all the tasks that are needed and assign those out to people. And then also we suggest a family meeting is really helpful too, to bring everybody in on the same page. If you're hosting that family meeting, do some preparation in advance and really think about the needs and wishes of the person you're caring for, making those first and foremost, getting everybody on the same page to focus on that person and their needs and what needs to be done. Be prepared to answer and address concerns people have. Sometimes people are afraid of helping out with caregiving. They don't know if they'd be good enough at it, or they're worried about this different aspect of it. It's good to be prepared to acknowledge those concerns in advance, because that's more likely to knock down those barriers and get people to help. And then just leaving you with a couple extra resources. As I mentioned, we'll share the Caregiver's Handbook following our session today. There's lots of stuff in there that we've covered today, but also a whole bunch that we haven't. So tips for caregiving from long distance, financial supports and caregiver organizations in your communities, tips for communicating with medical professionals, tips for how to talk to your loved one about potentially moving to assisted living. Also a goals sheet to identify what's important to the person you're providing care for. And lastly, an independent living assessment. This is a good one to repeat every few months or as health changes. That helps reflect on current levels of preparation for aging in place at home, and thinking through, where the next step is. Where do you go, when it's no longer feasible to be home? All right, so it's time for questions. I really do appreciate your time and listening to me ramble on for this past hour. Thank you for hanging in there with me, and it'd be wonderful to just open up the floor for some conversation and questions.
Thank you so much, Brandy. We're going to turn off the record part now, and we